according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus took Peter, James, and John, his brother, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, conversing with him. Then Peter said to Jesus in reply, Lord, it is good that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. And while he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud cast a shadow over them, and then from the cloud came a voice that said, This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. When the disciples heard this, they fell prostrate and were very much afraid. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, Rise and do not be afraid. And when the disciples raised their eyes, they saw no one else but Jesus alone. As they were coming down from the mountain, Jesus charged them, Do not tell the vision to anyone until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. The Gospel of the Lord. Father Frederick Faber was a spiritual author and director who lived about 150 years ago. And yet, his insights are still very relevant. Father Faber described our spiritual life as a trek through the desert with occasional stops at an oasis. In other words, he is saying, we live most of our spiritual lives in the desert. It's pretty dry. There's not a lot of consolation, not a lot of warm feelings to carry us on. We live by faith. But then every once in a while, we come to an oasis, which is a moment of light, of vision, of understanding. And that strengthens us to continue our trek through the desert. Now, we cannot possibly understand today's gospel without placing it into context. Right before today's gospel in Matthew, Jesus told his disciples for the very first time that he was going to suffer greatly and be put to death. And that whoever came after him would have to deny himself and take up his cross and follow him. The disciples didn't want to hear that. I mean, they saw Jesus as the great Messiah that everybody had been waiting for. What's all this talk about death and suffering? The disciples were trekking through the desert without understanding. Then Jesus took them to the top of the mountain and was transfigured before them. Now, we don't know the details of what happened. That isn't important for us to even know. We know this much, that Peter, James, and John saw Jesus as much more than he seemed to be. Perhaps it was a vision of Jesus in his glory, like after the resurrection. We don't know, but that doesn't really make any difference. The point is, that was their oasis moment. That's when their faith was strengthened, and they were enabled to stick with Jesus through the tough times ahead. No wonder Peter said, Lord, it is so good for us to be here. Let's stay here. He wanted to stay there for a long time. I'm sure he did. But Jesus said no. He brought them back down the mountain, and they continued their journey in faith. You and I need our own transfiguration moments. Our life sometimes gets tough. It can really get tough. It can get tedious. perhaps even sometimes look hopeless. We need our oasis moments. Perhaps it's feeling good after not feeling good for a long time. You know? Perhaps we need our moments because we're tired. We're tired of just doing the same stuff over and over and over again without any measurable progress or movement. Or maybe we feel burdened, really heavily burdened, by the violence, the unkindness in the world around us. That can get heavy. Or, maybe we just feel undervalued, unappreciated, perhaps even unloved. We need our transfiguration moments. And we have them. We're not going to see Jesus in glory. We're not looking for that. But we have those moments. Like when we do feel good after a long time. Or when we see love and kindness around us. Or when what we say we believe appears to be more real. My God, it's true. God is real. Faith is worth the risk. Or hope shines through our clouds and shows us that it's okay to hope again. We need these transfiguration moments. And when we have them, just like Peter, James, and John, we say, Lord, it is so good to be here. We just like to stay right there. But life isn't that way. So you and I then return to our spiritual life, our trek through the desert in faith, until we come to the final oasis. But it's not an oasis. It's paradise, where faith becomes vision.